Okay, we ready? All right, call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Murray,
Present.
Councilmember Ryan,
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall,
Here.
Councilmember Payne Donovan,
Present remotely via teleconference.
Councilmember Woodard,
Attending remotely via teleconference.
and Mayor Matsumoto Wright asked to be excused.
Do I have?
Move to excuse. Second.
Very good. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the mayor's been excused. Moving on, we have the city manager's report. Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. A couple things to mention this evening. First, the Art of the Terrace show is still ongoing and will wrap up on Saturday of this week. It's over in the library. Check it out. Some of the art in there really blew my mind, actually. Some of the photography is amazing. So please go take a look at that. The Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group launched last night at, I think it was 6 o'clock, 6:30. It was a great event. Lots of good conversation was had, and it looks like that group is really going to participate in our comprehensive planning process and help deliver a plan that is appropriate for the community long term. We are about to kick off our website redesign next week, and that's not really changing the content that's on the web, but more the look, what it looks like and how it interacts with the public, and hopefully it'll be a more user-friendly experience once we're done. That's about a 6-month, maybe up to 9-month process to get completed, but we'll share that with you before we launch that live. Did want to remind people also that next month you'll probably see quite a few purple porch lights out and about in the community. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and those purple lights on the porch help show support for those that are dealing with that issue. Let's see here, community survey. We talked with the vendor today and going to get that launched. We wanted to share the results of that in the January edition of the community happenings. Unfortunately, the timeline is a little bit longer than that, and it would be a crunch to get that in that edition. So we'll share that in the, I believe it's the April or May edition, whatever the spring edition is. Share those results, but we'll also be reminding people to participate in that if they get a letter that's a representative sample of 3,000 households in our community. We try to get a broad demographic reach across all the different groups. We want to make sure all the community members have a chance to participate in that. Lastly, the Cops and Clergy meeting is next week, and we're looking forward to that event as well. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, City Manager. Just, I guess, a quick question, Jeff. You mentioned the porch lights, and I think in past years we have had limited availability of light bulbs for people to pick up. Mm-hmm. Is that something that is still ongoing this year, or?
That I'm unsure, but I can double check and follow up tomorrow. If we do have some available, we'll let people know on our social media accounts.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Councilmember Sonmore.
I'll bring it up now since it's under City Manager report. Are we going to talk about what's going to happen at the Briar City Hall next Tuesday? Is it ever going to come in front of a work session or council meeting before the contract is even presented?
Absolutely. That will come to council in a work session if the terms are something that we even need to continue discussion about.
Can I ask next time if those things would come before the council before we even present a contract to another city? Because this is a huge monumental thing that we've been talking about for years. And I guess I'm just a little bit taken back that it had gone out to a city before it even came, because there's consequences to our salaries and to our citizens because of that. And so I think it should have gone to council before and show transparency instead of looking at the notes and finding out it's going to go in front of the city council in Briar next Tuesday.
Yeah,
so I think it's getting out way in front of the council before it's even gone through the transparency that we're always used to doing. And so I think it's a big red flag to me.
Sure. So I have mentioned that in several of the weekly updates, just to try to keep council informed before we move forward. What we've talked to Breyer about is these are the terms that would be minimally acceptable to us, but everybody understands that the agreement, the contract has to go before council and be discussed before any final agreement is made. So these are just discussions at this point. There's no final deal.
I'm glad you said that because we have not talked about pros and cons on council. We haven't let our citizens have any feedback on it. It's just gone out to Breyer, and I almost feel like we're making false promises to them. And I hope other things aren't working in that same fashion.
Thank you. So just to clarify, no matter what action Breyer takes on Tuesday night, it's coming back to council for discussion before adoption.
Absolutely, and no action is contemplated with the city of Breyer. It's just these are the terms, or these are the areas in which, if there was an opportunity to work together there, that the city would feel comfortable, but that agreement would have to go before council, have to be discussed, have to be reviewed, and considered before anything else would happen.
Very good. Councilmember Sommer.
My concern is it's kind of done backwards, that it should have gone to council to see if we even wanted to go in that direction first, because now it's making the Mountlake Terrace City Council look like the bad guy if we talk about it and it's already over there. And so one of my biggest concerns is that I've been hearing for a couple of years is just let the city council, just throw it at the city council, and how they're going to decide, it all falls on them. And that's why sometimes I get a little upset over different things. But I just kind of want to make that clear that we get the pros and cons to everything, especially in our reports.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Zondor. Any other questions? Did I see yes, Councilmember Payne Donovan? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just quickly, Jeff, on the Cops and Clergy timing, would love to have that on my calendar. So perhaps that's you or Jennifer, but just want to make sure I've got the event time and location. Thank you.
Yep, we'll make that happen.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Anybody else? If not, moving on. All right, moving on to the next item. Jeff has the review interlocal agreement with the City of Edmonds for Ballinger Park.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm Jeff Betts, the Recreation Parks Director. And the item before you tonight, again, is to review the interlocal agreement with the City of Edmonds for the Ballinger Viewing Platform and Trails Project. So we are back with the same item you saw a month ago. And the reason is because we went to Edmonds Council and they approved it, but they made a couple of red line changes to the agreement itself. So just going back a little bit, we'll talk about the background of this agreement again for a brief bit here. But the Ballinger Park Master Plan was adopted in 2015, and that was segmented into an active eastern side and then also that passive western side of the park. So this phased project was estimated to cost around $15 million 8 years ago. Phase 1 was completed with the waterfront improvements over the past few years on the east side. And Phase 2 is currently under construction with the Hall Creek restoration. So this project is Phase 3, and the project focus is constructing a viewing platform, asphalt, gravel, and natural pathways, and also a new interurban access portal, and that's all on the west side of the park. So in January, the city published a request for qualifications and selected a consultant. The first public meeting was August 9th. And that was to discuss some design decisions to be made and gather some input. So the City of Edmonds approached Mountlake Terrace last year about partnering on these improvements and offered $200,000 to assist with construction. So those funds would assist Edmonds residents to be able to utilize the park and actually have some waterfront access there. So this interlocal agreement was approved by by the Mountlake Terrace City Council on August 21st, but then was presented to the Edmonds Council on September 19th. They requested a few changes to this agreement, but most were very small in nature. The one significant one was they wanted to move the deadline back from September 30th to December 31st, 2025, which only assists the project. So positive change, they suggested. The project budget is supported by 4 different funding sources that total almost $1.5 million. And the benefits of the ILA, as discussed previously, is ILAs are really effective in crossing city and also sometimes county lines to ensure residents have that quality access to parks and amenities. And as we know, people in anywhere, cities of Bothell, Seattle, anywhere else, they really don't care where those amenities are. They're going to go there. So it's really a good way to utilize resources effectively. So next steps for this agreement would include the staff recommendation to approve this ILA at your next regular meeting on Monday, October 2nd. And the project's next steps include continuation of the design. We'll have another public meeting to discuss some of the results and make further decisions. And then also, if all the environmental permits come through in time, not sure when that's going to happen, but we anticipate bringing this project to bed in spring next year with construction in summer 2024. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you bringing this back. And I guess I wanted to talk about the timeline because I think what had come before us before, the project timeline felt like we had a clear enough path there that I didn't have questions, but I guess I just want to make sure, given that the city of Edmonds doesn't pay us until we've reached substantial completion, that we are confident and that says the agreement shall terminate December 31st, or 20, words are hard this time of night, it's December 31st, 2025, that we are confident that covers us in a way where we will be able to receive the payment anticipated, for this agreement.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Okay.
So we hope to get to it next summer, but if not, it'll be the summer after, and this would incorporate the possibilities for both.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thanks, Jeff. I saw that you had a robust discussion over with our neighbors to the west, and this all makes sense. But you mentioned several changes to the contract, and I just want to make sure I saw all of them. I see 2 on the first page, the one that we just discussed in terms of timing, and then the other the insertion of an additional obligation, which makes good sense, but just wanted to make sure I was tracking everything else, or tracking all the red line in case there were any other things that I was missing.
no, I think you highlighted both of those there. It was the date, the termination date of the agreement, as well as the word additional.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just take this opportunity to say I think this is a terrific example of partnership and sort of shared regional amenities, especially we know how popular Lake Ballinger is. So great work on this, and I know that our neighbors to the west will benefit from having some improved access along the interurban trail over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Councilmember Sonmore?
Is our city attorney on the phone tonight?
I don't think so, not on Thursday
She's on
usually.
council, okay. Jeff, can I ask, what did they want to get from the word additional?
I think it was just to show that they are incurring an obligation in general of providing those $200,000, but there was no additional obligation beyond that $200,000.
I'm just wondering from a legally standpoint, I don't understand what the additional obligations would be.
Well, it would be, say that the project had overruns, and we'd come back to them and say, we want you to pay for more, percentage of this project in relation to what you paid before.
But they've already agreed to $200,000
Right.
flat, so they haven't agreed to pay anymore.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty, I didn't think it was a very substantial change, really, so it was okay.
And has there been any other, I know, besides Facebook, any issues? People, I know in Mountlake Terrace still want it to be a Mountlake Terrace park, and people keep on saying, no, it's a regional park. Has there been any more discussion on that?
No, I mean, nobody has sent me any notes about an issue related to that. I know that a lot of Edmonds residents are very excited to have a more welcoming entry into the park. And I know some people did express their interest in them improving their boat launch area. They have a really narrow boat launch, but I don't think that's part of their plans right now. So I think it's a good use of funds for them to be able to have access to that 55-acre park when they don't have very much park space on the east side of Highway 99 there. So it'll be a really good improvement for them for a minimal amount of money.
So if any of our citizens asked, it's still a Mountlake Terrace park. Edmonds is just fixing their side of the park where the city of Edmonds is. So we're just making sure that anyone has any concerns. It's still a Mountlake Terrace park, and Edmonds is hoping their residents can use that side. They're actually doing some improvements to the park, and there's been no changes to who owns the park.
No, yeah, Mountlake Terrace still owns the park. We actually are obligated to it for a really, really, really long time through federal funding. So there's no way to divest of ourselves of any of that piece of the property. But they want to improve it. It's just adjacent to city property, right? So just an access point for them to enjoy it.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, that is on the consent agenda on Monday night. Very good. All right, thank you. Next up, we have Carolyn with the reviewing the salary survey results.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Carolyn Hope, the Deputy City Manager. And tonight we will be talking about our comprehensive 2023 salary and benefit survey methodology and results. I wanted to let you know that we did update the presentation. So if you're looking at it online, just make sure you refresh because it was about a half an hour ago. Yeah. So, first of all, I wanted to introduce the team. As you know, we presented the methodology in August to you and decided to conduct this process in-house. And so I led the team and had Lan Wynn, our executive assistant, who is a master whiz at Excel and couldn't have done this without her. Our city clerk, Jennifer Jokey, and our HR manager, Leslie Choate. So this was a team effort, and now it's in the hands of our finance director. So we will be presenting to you tonight some of the information. We've been doing a lot of quality control on the data, so there are a few changes that I'll talk to you about. And in between now and October 12th, we will be working on a financial strategy to present to you on the 12th so that we can talk about possible implementation strategies. So tonight, again, we're going to go through, I'll review the methodology with you again, and we'll talk about the results. We looked at 52 non-represented staff positions in this survey. I also just wanted to reflect a little bit on Council's priorities in our financial policies, and that while it's really important to maintain a stable financial basis, we also want to look at maintaining our service levels. And as you know, a big portion of our budget is our employees, because our employees provide those key services to our community. And this is a really important survey, as you know, because you helped fund this work last year and recognized the need to do such a survey. but this is really important to retaining and recruiting staff, and we'll talk more about that. So as I mentioned, we've been doing some salary surveys over the years, but essentially what's been done is looking at the Association of Washington Cities database, which provides great data. Pretty much all of our local cities submit their salary schedules to AWC, and you can sort it to find, different positions from different cities and pull data from it. The one downside to it is it doesn't include all the job descriptions. And so if you don't understand the jobs that you're comparing to, you could make mistakes. And so every so often, it's really important to do a comprehensive salary survey. We'll talk about that more in a minute, what that entails. But we did authorize such a survey to occur. And again, I shared the methodology on August 7th with City Council. So this is just our agenda. We're going to go through the background, talk about the comparable cities, review the methodology for the survey, talk about recommendations, and then talk about the next steps and council potential action. So again, we have not done a comprehensive salary survey in at least 15 years. Not sure if one was done beforehand. We have done cost of living adjustments over the years. The abbreviation is COLA, and those are really to keep up with inflation, but those are not a salary survey, and they are not a salary adjustment based on the market demand. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here. So compensation surveys are really important because they assess the market in different ways. They help provide a lot of data to our decision makers, you and even staff, on data to inform what the market is doing, what it's driven by, and how that impacts salaries and competition in the market. It's super important to have this data to defend our position and the decisions we make in funding and hiring and deciding what kind of positions we're going to have within our city. And the salary survey is a way to look at things outside of inflation. Inflation is something we should be looking at every year, as we do in our budget process, but this is looking at what's happening in the labor market, and that includes public and private employees. Although we're only comparing ourselves to private sector agencies, the private market is a factor in this, and it creates demand for workers. And so we'll talk more about that, and I have some charts to share with you on that. The other major thing, as I mentioned, is looking at our own job descriptions, making sure they're still up to date, that people are in alignment with their job descriptions, the roles and services they're providing, and comparing those to other cities. And we have some unfortunate examples of where that hasn't happened in the past, and people are very far out of market. So, and lastly, it's an opportunity for us to look at equity within the city and whether jobs within the department or at the same level of hierarchy within the city are being paid equitably. So just a note again about inflation and how that is different, and that we do look annually at the cost of living indices to adjust for inflation through our COLA processes. But there are other factors that we look at, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the labor market with you. This is a chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's nationwide. It's pretty interesting because it looks at the trends over the past 20 years of job openings, hires, layoffs, and quits. And you can see right now that there are a lot of openings and not enough people to fill all those openings. So that creates demand for workers. This is a more localized chart that it shows unemployment rates, which is another key indicator in the labor market. So the lower the unemployment rate, the harder it is to find workers. You can see here the Seattle area is the green dash line, and that we have a lower unemployment rate than the state and the country. The other thing that we've talked a lot about, especially since COVID, is where are all the workers? And Jeff and I attended the Washington City Managers Conference, and there was a great presentation by an economist at the state DES, and he talked about this data, and this was really interesting about, this is nationwide, but COVID really has had an impact on our workforce. We lost 3,000 workers who passed away as a result of COVID, and then there's somewhere between 400,000 and 4 million people who are suffering from long COVID who have either decided not to go back to work or maybe have changed their work habits. And so that has a big impact on us. There's been a lot of changes in the immigration laws, and that's impacted about 1.3 million workers. And a lot of those folks have college degrees, but certainly a lot of folks are in the lower end of the labor market. And then we have a lot of folks retiring, a lot of baby boomers, and a lot of people who are just retiring at a younger age than typical. So again, just looking at the labor trends, when we have more job openings than workers, it creates a stress on wages. So it causes wages to go up. And when we have more workers than job openings, it's not as big of a stress on wages. They might not go down, but they might not go up as quickly. So just wanted to share that. And we are currently in the upper left-hand corner of this chart. So the demand is high for workers, so wages are very competitive. So just focusing on Mountlake, the city of Mountlake Terrace more, this is a chart of employee turnover over time. And I want to note that 2022 and the current year are some unusual years for us. Last year, we lost over 30 employees, and this chart shows why people left, whether they were terminated, they resigned, retired. We have had a few folks who passed away, unfortunately, and sometimes we eliminate positions due to needs, financial needs, and so forth. But last year we lost 22 employees who just quit, and that's pretty significant. And this year we've already had more than 11 folks resign and 5 retire. So this is something to keep in mind. We're really, as you know, we've been stressed on filling positions. And here's just a little summary of some of the positions we've had a hard time filling. There's some research about time to fill jobs. There was a survey done by HR firm Robert Half earlier this year, and they were noting that the average across the country right now is about 11 weeks to fill jobs, which is fairly long. That's 77 days. And you can see here on our chart that there's several positions that are way past 77 days. So the other thing to note, we budgeted for 155 FTEs this year, and right now we have about 97. So there's a lot of part-time folks that we hire in recreation in particular, and we've really been struggling to fill those roles. We had 155 FTEs budgeted, and right now we have about 97. So as I mentioned, reviewing job descriptions is a really important part of this work. It's important for us to make sure our descriptions are up to date, that we're comparing to the correct jobs. Some of the things that we looked at also included educational experience, supervisory requirements, years of experience, certifications, and different things like that to make sure that we were really comparing apples to apples. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this before, but I just want to give you a review on the comparable cities selection and methodology. This is a really important part of the work. For many, many years, we had a pretty steady set of comparable cities, and I'll show you those at the end of this section of the presentation. But several of those cities were pretty remote from the metro area, and I have to say that one of the things that I find interesting about Mountlake Terrace is that we are on the border of King County. We're just a couple of miles away from Seattle. We are in a place that has light rail coming, that we have a lot of redevelopment occurring, and a huge change in our population and demographics. So there's a lot of things that we experience as a city doing our work that relate to urban issues. And so it's important to think about that a little bit as we move into this comparable cities analysis. So typically what cities do is they start out looking at who's within 25 miles of us. So they gather a list of cities. Then they look at population. And in this case, we looked at populations between 10 and 100,000 people as a first cut. One of the things that I thought was super important for us, because we are practically a full-service city, is to find cities that have the same services, because we really need to find at least 3 jobs in every category to compare to, and preferably more, but 3 would be our minimum goal. We also look at assessed value, property tax collected, and sales tax collected, or sales tax per capita. And we looked at those by per capita as opposed to a total, because we are such a small land mass. And so it was really hard to compare cities that are much larger than us and think about how they might be comparable or not. So that was a really interesting exercise. And the goal was to come out with 10 comparable cities. So this is just a review of that analysis, and this is in your memo as well. So we started out with those cities that were within 25 miles. We narrowed it down by the population. So this is the list between 10,000 population and 100,000. And then we excluded cities on the Island County, Kitsap County, and Monroe, because they were so far outside the metro area that they didn't meet some of those criteria that I talked about. Next, we looked at services, and these are just a list of key services that not every city offers. And so we looked at having a city manager form of government, sewer and water utilities, fleet management, recreation programs, and aquatics, and a police department. And really tried to find folks who had those kinds of programs, so we had enough jobs to compare to. We looked at the assessed value per capita. We looked at property tax per capita and sales tax per capita. And then we compared all of those attributes to see where we had the most commonality with the neighboring cities. And we ended up with 10 cities. And this is the final list. So the list on the right to the 2023 list are the comparable cities: Burien, Edmonds, Kenmore, Lake Stevens, Linwood, Marysville, Mercer Island, Mill Creek, Mukilteo, and Shoreline. Yes? Yeah. So first of all, comparable services was a big factor. Mercer Island had the most similar service model that we do. And while they do have a higher property value than we do, they were really comparable in other areas, such as population, sales tax, and
I would just like to dispute Marysville, Linwood, Mercer Island, Shoreline, and Edmonds. I don't think they're comparable to what we've done. And I see some issues that maybe we should have discussed before and go back and maybe take some of those cities out. They also have large commercial bases, and I'm just worried about how we may have set up our employees with some of the findings.
So we did look at sales tax for that very reason, because people had raised the question about Linwood, and that's why we looked at it in this way. And so while Linwood definitely has more sales tax than other cities, but in other ways, such as property tax, they're more, they have fewer property tax income. They have less property tax revenue than we do. Their assessed value is very close to ours when you look at it. So Certainly, there will be differences between cities. We're just trying to find 10 within that region that are as close.
Why did it have to be 10?
That is a standard practice because not every city has all the jobs. So as
Where's a standard practice from? AWC's chart or where's
from
this?
HR professionals and local government and
Oh, we have something on that says you can use 10 cities? I mean, you have I'm just trying to understand how it was formulated.
we checked in with some people in the region that have done salary surveys, and honestly, when you look at the charts in the attachment for every job, you'll see some jobs do have 8 or 10 matches, and some only have 3. And
I've
so,
checked with cities too, and they said sometimes simpler is better, looking at some different variables, and so that's why I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
how you got to where you have 10 cities and maybe not just 5.
well, the most important thing is to make sure that we have cities that provide the same services that we do, and I can tell you that there's some jobs, especially in recreation, where we were at 2 or 3 comparable jobs because.
And so that's where I get a little nervous at, because maybe I'm hearing that maybe we shouldn't be a full-service city if maybe we're looking at bumping up, a lot of money for employees, because we are only 4 square miles, and we only have such a base of income coming in. And I'm just afraid maybe this is going out to property tax increases just to pay. And so I could just hear the comeback of maybe we should cut services. And so that's what I'd like to hear more about too.
Those are all your prerogative. Those are decisions the council can certainly make. I'm here tonight to talk about the methodology and the survey results, and obviously these are decisions for you to consider.
And you said for us to, but our employees have already seen this presentation, so I was kind of wondering why it didn't come to the council first before it went out to all the employees.
The employees are very frustrated. There are many employees who probably won't stay with us if they don't have any significant salary change. They were promised a salary survey last year. It didn't go well, as you know, and so you authorized funding for a different salary survey. That salary survey didn't follow any different methodology and didn't come up with any significantly different results. So there's a lot of frustration
So
among
you're
staff.
kind of saying to me that council has to make this hard decision in order. So I guess that's where my concern is about that other situation, is it should have come to council first, so we could have talked about it, because now I feel like it's already been out to our staff, and they're looking at the council just to pass it, and that's why I'm real
We've made it
concerned.
very clear to them that there's no guarantees.
But could it have come to council first before it went out to our employees?
So, true, it could have come to council first. If it came to council first, it would have been published and available for our employees regardless before council saw it.
And they're discussing it in different things. And I just don't want to I just want transparency, is all I'm saying. And sometimes I get frustrated that things are going behind the scenes now, and it just comes to council, and we're just supposed to make a decision. And I'm really worried about where it's headed.
I want to assure you that we are trying to be as transparent as possible. There has been a lot of distrust among our staff. And part of our job is to, work with our most important thing is, yes, to work with you to build trust and to serve you in every way. But our staff, we can't do our work without our staff. And no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have a two-way street, right? Like we're definitely here to serve you, and we're also trying to build our organizational culture back. We've had.
And your jobs are to look at our financial stabilities. And
Yes,
so that's
yeah.
the other thing that I wanted to hear.
We will definitely be talking about that. We're in the process of crunching the numbers and trying to provide you with options the next time we come back. We understand that this is a huge lift, but there's also been years and years of not looking at the salaries in this way. So we are in an unusual situation.
And that's one of the reasons, too, our budget has been balanced, and a lot of cities are not having as balanced budget as they want. So that's why I'm just trying to tell the council, proceed with caution and really listen to it, because of course we want to give everybody raises, but I think having that financial look, because we know in 6 years our budget is not very good.
Yes, we fully understand that. I did not come here thinking this would be an easy decision for you. So I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Sonmore, very much.
While we're paused for a minute, does anybody have any other questions before we continue on? Anybody? All right. Very good. Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is, besides looking at our comparable cities, from an equity standpoint, we wanted to look at our bargaining units and just see how we compare with benefits and COLAs in particular. So we will be looking at that. This is just a quick overview of the methodology for the next steps. So one, as we mentioned, we reviewed the job descriptions. We looked for 75% match with the major tasks and looked for similar experience. We compared salaries for each job and developed an average range for each job. That was the market range. And then we developed a new banding system for salaries, which I'll explain to you, and tried to find the right band for each job. And then we looked at which jobs belonged in the same band together. So if we had a supervisor in one place and a supervisor in another place, did it make sense that they were in the same band if they were really close in salary? So just looking at those sort of equity issues and making sure that there was enough room between different tiers of management or staff for people to grow in the future. And we also looked at comparing benefits. We talked about that a bit. So this is just an example of one job of how many comparable city data we had. This is administrative assistant, and we ended up having 9 comparable jobs in this case. So we came up with we looked at the minimum years of experience, any educational and certification requirements, and then we found the minimum and maximum hourly rate for this position and came up with what the market average was. So this job currently is at $25 to $32 an hour, and the market is $30 to $38. So in this case, this job is about 20% off the market. On a couple of these slides, I've made some updates since the original memo. We had some additional quality control going on. So Civil Engineer 1, we had great comparables from all the cities, and this one is also about over 20% off market, and we had some really good data for that one. There's 2 jobs here that were over 60% off market, and this is an example of people not looking at the job descriptions. So in this case, we had a position called accountant. The position clearly supervises a good portion of the finance department, assists the director in developing the budget and many other critical tasks in the department, but it had been compared to accountant for many years. And so this position is 60% off market because they looked at the titles only. Another example of that is the recreation programmer. This one's more complicated because we have a very complex recreation program with multiple tiers. And a lot of cities have positions called recreation coordinator, and we do too. But the programmer manages the coordinators. And so the coordinator job got compared to other positions called coordinator, whereas really in other cities, the coordinator job was more similar to the programmer. So it's just a complexity of titles and really understanding how our department is structured. This is just a summary of all of the jobs we looked at and how many of them were close to market, above market, or far below market. And so basically, best practice is to have most of the positions within 5% of market. Some cities aim to be at the average of market. We have 88% of our positions that are further than 5% from market. And two of those are the over 60. So as I mentioned, we came up with the average ranges for each job, and we created this new banding system. Let me just talk about that banding system for a minute. This is just a segment of it, and the full bands are at the very back of your attachments. The band starts just right about minimum wage for the state, and then it goes up 2.5% for each band. So there's just a consistent set of bands. Some of them will be blank, but in the future, somebody might move into that band. And then we also are proposing to go to a step system for pay raises within each position. This makes it very clear and transparent. If you are satisfactory or above in your position, your supervisor can recommend you for a step increase, and that step increase is always 5%. So there's no disparity between a manager potentially favoring one employee over another and giving maybe 2% raise for someone and 5% for another who are doing very similar work. Or for two different managers, just having a different philosophy about raises, and one liking to give a higher raise and one liking to give a lower raise. So this is just really clear, and it also makes it much easier for budgeting purposes to figure out how pay might be changed over the years. Yeah.
Onmore.
Can you mention how they get to the steps? What's the process to get to from step 1 to step 2 to step 3?
And that would be through their performance review process.
So it's still based on that person's opinion through their performance review?
Yes,
but it's just a flat fee of 5%?
Right, that's right.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Carolyn.
So when we looked at these tables and we had the market average, we took that scale, that range, and we tried to find the right location within these bands for that job. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we also looked at making sure like type jobs or like type of experience or responsibility within jobs are banded in the same bands together. So you can see that there's multiple jobs in certain bands.
Can I ask, if I'm a level 1 and I'm maybe get to a level 5 in 5 years, then I just max out forever? Until the next COLA?
Right, that's right.
And what was the purpose of the 5%?
It's just it's a graduated way to give people raises within that band. So that's a way for you to get from the minimum to the maximum.
But if somebody's on the cusp, let's say you can't give them 3%, it's either 0 or 5%.
That's the way this would work, yes.
Any other questions?
I guess it just makes it hard having it just 5%. Sometimes you're given a certain amount of money for each department, and there's can be a peanut butter spread over different things. So how can you forecast? Are you when you're looking at the budget and you just assume everybody's making 5% on each increase? And I'm assuming they can do that yearly or every 6 months? Or?
Yearly. It's yearly. And yeah, for budgeting purposes, we would assume everyone would make the step increase. Obviously, that might not be the case, but it would be a conservative estimate.
And just to clarify, that's in addition to COLAs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, carry on. Thank you.
So one question that was posed last time was how would we decide if we're moving into a step program where people would go from now into which, like if we made this change, how would we determine what step people landed in today? So we did an analysis of the current ranges of pay and what percent in 20% increments, like what percent they were at. So, for example, if someone was making $90,000 to $100,000 a year and they're currently making $93,000 a year, they're basically at 30% of the range for that job. So they would be placed in step 2, since it's 20% tiers for each step. Does that make sense? So just a couple of slides about why we have such a large gap and why people are so far from the market. One, we have only given COLAs for as long as I know, for the last 10 years at a minimum, probably longer. So, and this chart shows how inflation is the gray bar on the chart. And then we have the COLAs for the Police Guild and the Teamsters next to our non-represented folks. And of course, tonight we're talking about our non-represented folks. So the non-represented employees over this period of time have been paid 7.75% less than the Police Guild and 4.25% less than the Teamsters, and are certainly below inflation rates. So that's one factor. And this is just a comparison of the COLAs for the non-represented employees compared to inflation. And again, the salary adjustments that we're talking about tonight aren't about inflation, but this is just one factor besides not having done a salary and benefits analysis like this for a long, long time, not keeping up with inflation also has been a factor. So I was going to move on to benefits comparisons. Are there any other questions before we go there?
Anybody? Any questions before we move on? All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we asked our comparable cities to share data about vacation accrual and carryover, sick leave accrual and carryover, health plan cost sharing, management leave, comp time accruals, and working from home policies. And tonight I'm only going to share with you the benefits where there was a difference. So we were in alignment in a lot of cases, but there were a couple areas where there were some differences. So vacation accrual, we were pretty on target with the market, but when we looked at our bargaining units, there was a slight difference. The Teamsters if you were at 21 years of service, you could accrue at 17 hours a month, and the Police Guild was in the same category. But our employees maxed out, in the non-represented group, they maxed out at 16. So we were proposing to bring them up to the same standard, so adding the 1 hour a month when you hit 21 years. We looked at medical benefits matching, and we were on target for employees. Pretty much all of our comparable cities give employees 100% cost share. On the dependent side, we were pretty close. There was only one city that didn't provide 90% match. And then looking at our represented groups within the city of Mountlake Terrace, they both provide 90% match. So we propose giving our non-represented staff a 90% match. And that was the main difference in the medical. Management leave, we do not have at the city. This is sometimes offered to exempt employees to compensate them for overtime that they work because they're not eligible for overtime. And this has become a more common thing, as you can see here from our comparable cities. Many of them are providing management leave. We didn't have any data from Mill Creek, so outside of Mill Creek, all of the comparable cities are providing management leave at different rates. Sometimes they provide it only to the director's team, but there's been a trend to provide it to all exempt employees or at different rates for different tiers of employees. So we're proposing to provide a tiered approach, so 80 hours a year for the director level team, 40 hours for sort of the management tier, and 32 hours for other exempt employees. This would not carry over, and it could not be cashed out. Let's see. I think. I feel like these slides are in the wrong order. Let's see. Okay, I'll just go through. I think you have this table in your packet, but it's just a summary of, for your own benefit, if you wanted to just see the data by position, how far they were from the market, what their current mid-range is, what the mid-range at the market would be, and then we provided some other scenarios for what it might look like at different targets beyond the market. And there will be a few changes to this table. Like I mentioned, there were a couple of things we caught this week that were incorrectly entered, and we will get that to you next time.
What were those items?
Yeah, well, one was the finance manager, which I briefed you on already. We had the wrong job compares there. The civil engineer 1 and 2.
I'm sorry, you're on page 42?
I would have to look up in the attachments. It was called accountant prior.
I'm sorry, you just said you made a couple changes. I'm just trying to figure out what slides.
I didn't make the changes in your attachments, but I will bring them back to you the next time.
Are they just lower, higher?
I can summarize them for you. I have a list right here. So the accountant was the slide I showed you earlier. It was reclassified as a finance manager. And so in your original presentation, I showed this as accountant supervisor. And we found that even within our own team, we missed the right job descriptions. So we went back and fixed that. It came to my attention that the civil engineer 2 and 1 had some of the same comparables. So we needed to fix that and make sure that they were put in the right location. So we removed 2 jobs from the 2 that were more appropriate for the 1. So that moved the the civil engineer 2 up 2 bands. There was a data entry error in the public works supervisor category. That was corrected, and that caused that position to move up 1 band. And then the commander position, also there was a data entry error, and that actually didn't change the average, but I did notice when looking at that job should have been moved up 1 band. So those were the key changes that we found this week. And we will correct all the attachments for you for the next time.
Everybody, any other questions before we move on? All right, go ahead.
So the key recommendations for your consideration, and certainly this is just a conversation and we'll have a whole other work session that talk about finances, are to think about trying to get within 5% of the market average, adding management leave, which is a no-cost benefit to employees, for exempt employees, changing the vacation accrual to match our bargaining units, bless you, and changing our dependent match in our medical program from 80% to 90%, which is about a $16,000 a year change for the current employees right now. I also updated these numbers based on some of the changes we've been making. Yes, Councilmember?
So on the updated costs, if I'm understanding this chart, and I guess that's why I'm a little jumpy on it, for 52 non-represented employees, we're looking at almost $1.5 million increase.
Yeah, that includes the changes to benefits because some of the benefits are based on people's base salaries.
When you say benefits, I'm thinking medical, what's the actual dollar amount coming out of the budget? Is it the 1.35?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that's for 52. How is this going to affect, since we've already kind of done this work, how is that going to affect the bargaining with most of our employees being in bargaining units? Because if we're looking at 1.5, I'm assuming when you're dealing with bargaining, now we're not going to have that much room to bargain. And so are we going to have a forecast on what those costs could be?
Yes, we will.
Because we're looking at maybe $2 to $3 million in increases in budget. And so that'll come.
That's all part of the exercise we're working on right now to bring you back those numbers so that we have a good understanding of what the implications of these proposals, along with projections on the bargaining unit discussions.
So my question is you're going to leave it up to council who gets what raises? Because what if we come back to you and say we can't afford the $1.35 million? How's that setting up our employees? Because looking at our budget, and I'm just forecasting, maybe we can't do that. So how are you going to bring back a proposal of who gets what raises?
So there's different ways to do this. So we're going to come back to you with these two different financial options for meeting the market average and being 5% away from market. Another option that council could consider is either a phased approach, which still leaves us further from the market than 5% probably. But we would work to try to get people who are furthest from the market closer to the market than people who are closer to the market. So we would have to look at every single job individually. The two scenarios I've given you right now, everyone is moved in a similar fashion, so they're an equidistant, equidistant away from the market. But there are ways that we could do this where we're focusing on people who are furthest from the market.
You.
It's still on.
Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Wall mentioned earlier, are you also, that $1.35 million is not any of the COLAs, right? And so they'd all get COLAs. So on top of so if they get that money up front, then that COLA, you know where I'm going, I'm not finding the right, substantiates that increase even more. So we're not really looking at $1.35 million. We're looking upwards of $2 million. If we look at the COLAs, if they've already gotten the raises, plus the COLAs, how much is that?
We're going to bring that to you at the next work session. We have all of that data in the works for you. So there was a lot of information to share tonight, so I just wanted to do this in a two-step approach. And I also realize this is a lot of information for you to digest. And the next time when we meet, I'm happy to answer more questions or take other considerations from you as opposed to, how we could move forward.
And then you're not looking at any more salary raises for another 5 years?
So we would look at the database for AWC every year when we do our budget adjustments, just to make sure that we're not trailing too far from the market once we set the market again.
So that's another additional bump that we're going to have to look at the budget as well. So we'll get financial on what it is to get everybody, what it is to get the lowest up, what it is for the COLA, and what forecasts look from AWC then.
Well, we don't have forecasts from AWC, but we can make some assumptions, so, yeah.
And thank you. And just, so when we get to the financial discussion, we'll also have the six-year forecasts.
Yes, it'll be put into the 60.
So in other words, yeah, that's where we get at the 1.3 turns into 2.5 next year and 3.8 or whatever the following year. So that's where we'll be able to take into consideration all the financial numbers. And importantly, we're not making any decisions tonight, right?
No,
This is
we
just
are not
information,
making any decisions.
getting feedback from council to be able to go back for the next round.
That's right.
And I'm hoping this will carry out through several work sessions and not making decisions, because that's what we talked about last time, is making sure all the council's up to speed. And that's what I really like is not one knowing more than another. It's we all know, we're all making those good decisions, and that's about any topic as well. And does renters have anything to do with this burden on renters' share of income?
Oh, those slides shouldn't have been a part of your presentation, I'm sorry. Those were,
Okay. I was just looking,
they
and
were
I saw
hidden.
that earlier today, and I was like, I wasn't sure what that was.
Sorry about that.
Oh.
I was just playing around with some economic data, and they were in the back of the presentation, so I apologize.
All right, sorry for getting off track there. So let's talk
Yes.
about the schedule then, I guess, right?
Yeah. So I'm happy to, one, answer any questions you have tonight, and if you have suggestions or want more information, I can gather that before our next work session, which we're projecting to be on October 12th, and that will be the night that we will have those financial projections for you. And if you want another work session after that, we're happy to do that. I list council action as another step, but I don't have a date for that because I want to give you the opportunity to have as much time as you need on this topic.
Councilmember Sommer, go ahead.
So
Sorry.
this really concerns me is the schedule, and that's what I was talking about, looking at it. It's continue on October 12th, council takes action, and then pay changes. If I was an employee, all right, pay changes take place within 30 days, and our benefits will change on January 1st. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess from a financial policy decision, I guess I wouldn't have liked to have seen these dates in here like that. It's just,
I think the key dependent is council action and when we take action.
It is.
And if we then approve it, then that's the timeline, right?
Right, and so I did not put a date for council action. I wanted to give you the time you need to have these conversations, so. They do, yes, that's right.
so then, speaking of, then we'll get a readout of what that will be for January 1st as well. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different charts on finances and where is that money coming from? I know you guys are already looking at it.
Yeah, we'll provide that to you on October 12th. We do have over-under remaining balance, and we also have end-of-year balances as well to look at, but those decisions are up to you as far as how you want to spend that.
Bottom
Right.
line is the general fund.
But
is where
I
it's coming
guess
from, right?
you're asking me to make a decision, but what I'm trying to say is we need a lot of data.
I understand that. I'm not asking you to make a decision tonight. I'm just asking for your feedback.
But with
Yeah.
that, we need the pros and cons instead of what's been done a lot of times to council. They just throw stuff out at us, and we hear later that, you got a weak council, they'll just pass it. And that's why I'm trying to set the standard for a lot of different things coming through is we need the pros and the cons, and we really need to discuss what's going on because we find out years later that things have gotten through because we didn't have to tell council or we didn't have the background on different things. And so I'm just setting up the expectations for next time. So when I ask these questions, it's not a big surprise.
Thank you,
you.
Councilmember Sonmore. And I see Councilmember Payne Donovan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Wall, and thank you, Carolyn. This is a really well done presentation. Sobering decisions to be made for sure, but I feel like you've really done some tremendously helpful research here. I'm just looking at, I think slide 14 on the background factors that impact salaries and competition, showing the employee turnover over the years, and I think that's particularly sobering given how many positions we have technically open, permanent FTEs that might have been backfilled or we're making do with, borrowing and temp positions. But I'm just wondering if they're, thinking out into the future, if there are any planned, we see positions eliminated, any positions that we may be planning for, or if there are, and I realize this might be difficult to capture, but where we're contracting out for work that we might otherwise be doing in-house, whether that's public works or engineering or planning.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to understand where we might be using grant dollars to go to contract out for specific work, but yeah, I think simply put my questions best. You know, are we contracting out for work currently that we might otherwise have done by positions in-house?
Yeah, we have two consultants right now that are supporting our development review and public works teams right now because we haven't been able to hire planners and engineers. Ideally, when we get those positions filled, we will eliminate those consultant tasks. One of them is in particular related to sound transit, but so when sound transit's over, that one will also go away. But those cost a lot of money, and one of them in particular is primarily because we haven't been able to find the right people to do the work. We do use consultants on specific projects quite often because that work isn't sustained long-term, and often we don't have the right expertise in-house to do certain types of work. So, oh yeah, one of the consultants that were, do you want to speak to that? Yeah. Sorry, go for it, yeah.
One of the consultants that we use primarily for development review now that we would backfill, or not backfill, we would use in-house engineering staff for, were we able to attract some, is $265 per hour at the moment. The other piece of that, you asked about potential reorganizations, looking potentially in the 25-26 budget to create an administrative services department, which would handle risk management, IT functions, and HR functions. So that's a potential as well.
Councilmember Salmar.
So I'm going to ask some more hard
Oh,
questions.
actually, sorry, let me back up. Councilmember Payne Donovan, do you have any further follow-up on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I'll just take the opportunity to say that I think, you know, as a former municipal employee, you know, finding balance points across salary ranges, et cetera, really makes a massive difference in morale, and you know, makes I really understand, you know, from personal experience that we really do need to right the ship here, so that we can retain our, you know, the folks that keep our city government working and serve our residents. So I take this really seriously, and you know, I know that we'll have some really hard conversations. But I again want to thank staff for their work here.
Great. All right. Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Anybody else have any questions before
And
we
Steve,
follow
I
up?
didn't
Yeah,
know
does
if
Steve?
had
I'll get back to you.
Okay. So I have to ask the hard questions because I've been through this before where we've had to cut jobs, and that's why I'm getting, and I know, of course, I want to give everybody a raise. I do, but as a council member, your job is financial policy, right? You have to be good with public funds, right? So you have to ask all these dumb and hard questions, and I'll say dumb just to be funny, but so can you give me, what I'd like to see too is if you did these comparables with just the 5 cities closest to us, because we didn't have any say in what were the comparable cities, because I still believe Linwood, Edmonds, Marysville, and Mercer Islands are not comparable to Mountlake Terrace. If just look at the city, I mean, I look at Linwood and I don't see any comparables, and Mercer Island, I don't see any comparables. Marysville, definitely not a big comparable to me, and I just would like to see if that would, what that looks like. But one of the hard questions is, and it's come up before, and I'll just bring it up, and Jeff, don't get upset about this, but what happens in hard times is you have to look to see if your budget goes over, right? You have to see what jobs can be cut. And a lot of times we go straight to the pool. And those are some of the people I'd really like to bump up their salaries for. And well, the one thing I'd be asking is, have you guys looked at what things that we can outsource? I'm not saying I want to do it, but there might come a time if we go back into a recession or whatnot of these jobs that may have to be outsourced. We talked about getting rid of the pool because of cost recovery, and I don't want to see that happen. I really don't. And I just, my biggest thing here is I appreciate all the work that's gone into it and everything, but how do our employees feel about this? I mean, if they don't get a raise, I mean, just looking at, and I'm being honest and open here and trying to do transparency, but for 52 employees, we're probably looking, we've got the 135 million, we've got the COLA, and then we've got raises looking at AWC each year that we've voluntarily decided to add on. So maybe it would be $2 million in the next couple of years. And then we've got our other bargaining units. And so my biggest concern is setting up any employee that thinks just because they saw this presentation, council is just going to say, okay, we're going to pass it all. And we all want to be good stewards of our fund, and we all want to be nice, but sometimes we have to make those horrible, hard decisions. And so I just want to see every kind of data that's out there, because there might be a time where we might have to close the pool or do outsourcing and look, you know, we used to have our own fire department. We don't have it anymore. You know, police, we may have to look at doing it. We've talked about that before, is looking at putting together departments for policing and different things. But I just want to make sure that everything's been looked at and council has a clear understanding of what this all means.
Thank you, Councilmember Sommer. Good points. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate the presentation and appreciate the whole team's work on it. As somebody who spends a lot of time looking at these sorts of things and who's been through this sort of organizational reflection of the market and where we stacked up to the market and the very hard follow-up and how to navigate that. I think this is not easy work. I thought your approach was thoughtful. And appreciate all of the time and energy that's gone into it thus far. My, I guess, initial perspectives are that the labor market is the labor market. We are competing for talent, you know, with our neighboring cities, whether we like it or not. I don't think we are telling employees anything that they don't already understand, and I think our attrition rates and unfilled roles make that incredibly clear. And there are budget realities, and I'm looking forward to digging into them. I would love to understand if we've had conversations, because this is something I've brought up in the past as well, but obviously we have new staff. Like, it is really challenging as a smaller city, you know, with the realities of our budget. But again, like with also the realities of the labor market and the other municipalities and those in the private sector that we're competing with. So I don't know if there's like a small cities support group for recruiting and retaining amazing staff so that we can accomplish all of the things that we envision for our city and support the community, you know, the way that we want to and the way that they are asking us to support them. But I guess if we haven't had some of those conversations, I would love to see if there's any thoughtful, maybe outside the box ideas that we can include as part of the conversation, because it's challenging. It is a challenging role, you know, that we sit in, you know, and there's going to have to be balance. But I think having the conversation is critical, and the fact that this is the first time in 15 years we've gone out into the market, like, I appreciate that we are doing this work. It is important work to do, and so I'm grateful for all the work that's gone in there. Got all sorts of notes, but I will name that as somebody, again, who spends time nerding out about compensation outside of my role here. You know, there are limits to what we can do regarding the market, but I will say there's also inflationary pressures that, you know, organizations that lead the market when it comes to compensation are driving higher and higher compensation, in large part oftentimes because, one, the cost of housing has increased exponentially, and two, there's not enough folks to do the job. So I think as we think about like things that we can do as elected officials and as a city, I mean, I think thinking about housing affordability and availability and thinking about educational investment and support for students, like those are opportunities to impact, I think, on a broader level, some of these things that are driving up compensation at a rate that's hard to keep up with when your revenue is tax driven. So this is kind of an aside, but it was fascinating to look at all of the data, and I appreciate that you provided it all. I would love to see us, take a hard look at our requirements for roles, particularly around education. I think that is something that has been a topic of conversation in recent years around how do we reduce, unnecessary barriers. And I think that is beneficial both to folks in the community as well as to us as an employer. So I think thinking through particularly like it is where is an education requirement necessary because of the work that needs to be done, and where is it something that we stuck on there because at some point we thought that people should have a bachelor's degree. And so would love us to engage in that work, whether it's part of this process or separate from it. And I will just say, I guess as we are looking at some of those, I think kind of 6-year forecasts and that sort of thing, I do think, I appreciated the steps, and I think that it's really helpful to have those. 5% I think is a large increase along with the COLA each year on an annual basis. So I think particularly when we are looking at potential options to move forward with something and balance that with the realities of budget, would love to maybe at least have numbers to look at that reflect a different increase or step as part of that process. I guess the final thing I would mention, so our medical cost share is amazing. I don't know if all of our staff or folks that have been in the public sector for a long time realize that, but if we are trying to recruit folks from the private sector, I promise that employer matches don't look like that anymore and haven't in a long time. And the cost share for employees has risen exponentially. So I think when we talk about like ways to sell the opportunity that we provide, I think that is a really powerful, benefit and a reminder when folks are taking a look at the opportunity to work at the city, that there are also benefits that provide, a different level, kind of when you're balancing the total compensation package. I think that is very impressive. And so I hope folks know that, and I hope we're sharing that. I'm looking forward, maybe that's the rub, but I'm looking forward to having these conversations. I think they're important. I appreciate the work that staff does and recognize that we can't do any of the things that we want to do without them. And so I think it's important that we have, meaningful conversations here, and I think it's important to have data to drive those conversations. So I appreciate you setting the table and looking forward to the continued conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Murray. Just a quick second, I saw Councilmember Woodard's hand was up. Did you want to ask a question? Go ahead.
I do. Questions/comments, perhaps. First, really also want to chime in and say thank you for the work and the presentation. I think it's very thoughtful. I think it's reasonable. I also appreciate the questions. I think they're very thoughtful and very reasonable as well. And somewhere at that crossroad, we'll move forward in these dialogues. That said, while we're having these dialogues, I think one of the, baseline questions is how do we pay for it? That's really what I'm hearing as the main question, not are people worthy of it? Should they get it? Should it be higher? Any of that. It's just, brass tacks. How do we pay for it? And that's where I kind of want to make sure this is maybe a level setting, and correct me if I'm overestimating this, but we can't have this conversation in a vacuum, although that's what we're going to do, meaning that, how we pay for it draws us back to the economic development, making sure that we are investing, which we are in our current businesses, but also thinking about growth coming in. All of that, it goes back to that observation made about taxes being basically our bread and butter. So just kind of recognizing that, yes, we probably cannot afford $1.5 or $2 million increase in the next couple of years if everything remains constant, which is my recommendation and everyone else's along the way, to remind ourselves that has not been our policy to stay constant. It is to actually improve. So again, just kind of recognizing that decisions that we'll make here, in this case about perhaps salary increases, should also be tempered with well, how are we getting more businesses out here to raise our base? And are we making this conducive and easier for builders to come in and help us with the Growth Management Act portion that we're responsible for and everything that goes along with that? So I think that was more for me, not really a comment in there other than go ahead and check me if I'm wrong and banking too much on economic development. But really also to remind the public and our residents who are listening in that we're having this conversation in a vacuum, but that's not how the world will spin. And the bottom line is we will figure out how to pay for this because that's what you have to do as a city every budget cycle. This just happens to have some new variables in play that are long overdue. So again, thank you for the work and the presentation. And again, to my colleagues on the council, thank you for the very thoughtful questions and reasonable dialogue here.
Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I really appreciate the methodology used to get to all these decisions presented to the council. It's very daunting to figure this all out. And so I appreciate the methodology and the hard work you put into this. And I know we're getting more and more information that's going to be coming to us, especially on budget and paying for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryan. Councilmember Sonmor.
So you both brought up questions to me. So do we understand where all the levels of everybody are? Because most of our employees are new. So, the level of work and the same service that we got before with our other employees, judging that, because we do have to look at level of service, but also looking at where everybody stacks up. Are they all ones? Are they all twos? And then Councilman Murray, you talked about benefits. Can you enlighten me on what is the average benefit? Because we had to do bargaining agreements, and that's how we got down to 80% for spouses. What kind of averages are you seeing? I just don't know.
I don't know that I'm ready to throw what they are generally, but I will tell you, the organization I work at, we pay 100% of staff, but that is very different than I had experienced in the private sector. So I work at a nonprofit now, but my experience at the private sector was, I think I was paying 7 years ago, I think I was paying $300 a month for coverage, and that was just for me at the time. And we pay 0% for dependents and spouses up until 5 years of service. So, and there's all sorts of different things out there, but I will say it is not cheap. The cost of healthcare continues to rise exponentially, and that is a hard cost for organizations to keep up with. And so many private sector organizations have passed more and more of that cost on to staff in recent years. So I think it's a great, again, as we think about what is our, what is our selling point, or what are some of the wonderful things that we can offer, potential new employees. I think that is something that we should be highlighting. So.
Well, thank you for the update. And the other thing that's hard for understand too is we're not a business, and so we have to look at things a little bit differently. We have a pretty stagnant amount of income coming in. We can look at what builders are going to bring in and stuff, but sometimes that money can only be used in certain ways and certain times. And it's nice to think, that we can build and build and build, and that will help pay for everything. But that's also, where does the money come from, and how are those monies used? There's so many different variables that I think that was good that we talked about all those tonight.
Good. Thank you. Great conversation. Anybody else have anything else to add to the conversation before we move on? If not, all right. Well, we'll look forward to continued discussion on this on October 12th then. Thank you for the presentation and the information. All right. Then next up on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody online for public comment?
Yep, no one signed up, and we have someone in the online audience. If you'd like to make a comment, please use the hand raise tool. No public comment.
All right, very good, thank you. Has everybody, next on the agenda is the Monday's meetings. Everybody looked at the agenda for Monday night? Everybody good? Any questions? If not, then we'll move on to council comments. Any council comments tonight? Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'll keep it brief. Just want to explain that I'm here on the big screen because I've been exposed to COVID, and I just want to remind folks to stay safe out there because there's I feel like in my circles more and more exposures and more positive tests out there. So if you feel like you need to mask up or if you haven't considered the newest vaccine that's out, or not vaccine, the newest shot that's out here in I think coming out this week even, seems like it might be prudent. Anyhow, I look forward to joining you all in person once I have a few more negative tests. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for saving us. All right, Councilmember Woodard.
But now I feel like I'm on Front Street and have to explain why I'm not there. Not true. I just want to echo what I'm hearing and say mine's very similar, although mine is actually because I needed to stay away from anybody who might be positive, which is a strategy. And I appreciate this opportunity because in the morning I am our MC and storyteller for our Hope is Brewing fundraiser breakfast. And I do not have an understudy. So if I'm not there, I don't know what we were going to do. So that said, thank you for this access and for this thoughtful conversation again. And I look forward for those of you who are joining us in the morning to see you there or online because we are live streaming as well.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Any other council comments before we move on to adjournment? Seeing none, I'll call this meeting over. Done. I'm very sensitive to this now.